is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm John Buhler, staff writer, fansided.com. I'm joined today by a man who didn't disappoint his entire family in Las Vegas this weekend, who is still not done winning just yet, and is just getting started on this here podcast. The Cajun Beast himself, Cody Williams, content director, fansided.com. Slap some remoulade on that po' boy sandwich. How the hell are you?
Brother, I think you might be underestimating me to say that I didn't disappoint my family in Vegas. That's always in the cards, man. But probably not the same way that you're talking about. But no, man, I'm doing good. It's an early Monday morning, on a holiday day nonetheless. But glad to be here, glad to be talking some more ball because we had a wild weekend and we got a lot to unpack that we didn't like. I don't think we got to dive into everything on Saturday night.
No, like for example, like 3 yards in a cloud of punt. Again, it was fantastic return. These first two shows have been great. Y'all have been great, and this is false start. But obviously, with that show, it's kind of like an immediate reaction to whatever happened. And we said on the show like we had some thoughts about Ohio State that are still not fully formed yet, and they may not be there. But we definitely have some thoughts here about the game that happened last night in Las Vegas between the USC Trojans and the LSU Tigers. I believe the final score was 27-20
Hmm.
USC. Kind of the hate bowl because both people hate both of these coaches. So,
It's very true. A lot of unlikability off the charts, some would say.
I know it's like, and the fact that like Notre Dame wasn't playing, this was crazy.
It's it's unbelievable stuff. Truly remarkable feat that they pulled off in Vegas.
I know. I mean, I didn't say you're below below being able to disappoint your family in Vegas. Just you. I don't think you were there this weekend. So
Yeah,
like,
that's true. That's true. Hey, that's
that's
a good
the
point.
that's the major caveat here. Yes, we false started a little bit, and we're gonna start here today with our first and 15 with some "I'm trying, Jennifer." Brian Kelly had the first podium meltdown of the season after disappointing all the Bayou Bengals out there. He was angry. He was pounding his fist on the table. I mean, I guess Matt and Rob just did a really terrible job of parking cars.
Man, I'll be honest with you. Like, angry Brian Kelly just doesn't move me in a real way. Like, it's one of those things, like, when so let me backtrack. I grew up with a single mother, didn't have a whole lot of experience with this, but I did have uncles around who were there to like, help raise me and stuff like that when I was growing up. But you know how like you always have like that one like adult authority figure male who like you just can't really take them that seriously when they get angry. That's Brian Kelly to me. Like if I was a player on his team and he got angry at me, I'd have a really hard time like not just laughing in his face. Like he's very hard for me to take serious when he's angry.
I had a lot of experience with this. Obviously, the Bueller rage courses through my veins, and my father's and my grandfather's. We all have it there. I'm a little more subdued because I'm also Julie Bean's son, and she's super chill. But
That's right.
like all the baseball dads were growing up, or lacrosse and baseball, basketball, and everything like that. Like there was some dads out there. I'm like, you're just stupid. I'm not listening to you. I
Right.
had a lot of really bad coaches playing sports growing up that didn't really
Mm.
have my best interest or anybody's best interest in the sport other than themselves. But this is kind of like that with Brian Kelly. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's like the hot dog in a suit guy, like crashing his car with, I think you should leave. It's
Yes.
it's like, whose fault is this? I'm like, this is yours, bud. Like you left Notre Dame to
Hmm.
take over this, and you've become the ultimate driving machine. You know, you're down there in a Coach O's Hummer, man.
Yeah, I don't think Louisiana has the emissions test, so he's safe there at least. But yeah, you're like, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. Like, this is a problem he created. Like, one of his big points when he was pounding the table and getting angry about what happened in that game was, we didn't finish, we didn't execute, we weren't ready, we were on the sidelines acting like we had already won the game or like we already had it in the bag. Brother, that is your job. Like, especially Brian Kelly, who is more becoming more and more of a CEO type. Like that's literally your job. You're not out there calling plays. You're not out there like making the magic happen. No, you're paid to be a CEO, to build a culture, to build a program, and to get players in the building. You've got the players in the building. Now it's time to build the culture and build the program. And clearly he's the one doing with the shortcomings here because I don't think sorry, I just saw Huron's face here. Just poke out and look at the camera real quick.
I,
Um Sorry, the periphery got me. But no, like I do think like end of the day, it's just like this is your job. This is what you are paid to do. This is why you LSU wanted you to come from Notre Dame because he did a good job at this at Notre Dame, I do believe. But like you're not succeeding totally at LSU. And to be clear, I'm not trying to be hard on LSU for this. This is a good football game between two good football teams, one lost by one score. Like this isn't a Miami, Florida situation where we're looking at it like, oh, Florida's dog water. Like they're not going anywhere this year. Like I still think LSU is going to have a very good season, but the things that he's mad about feels like the things that are in his control.
For sure. I mean, like we both were probably on different sides of this game. I think you were leaning more closer on USC winning, and I was more on LSU. Again, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose because this is college
Mm.
football and ties are stupid. And this is false start. Yeah, there's nothing more un-American than a tie. It's the we didn't we be drinking tea, man, and having really stupid accents that aren't Southern here.
Yeah, man. What if this was a British podcast? Just imagine that. No, no, we don't tie.
No, no, we'd be talking football with two halves.
Two halves. Yeah.
But it's like you've had Garrett Nussmeier in the program for a while. Similarly, like Miller Moss has been at USC. I think they both looked really good. I think that there's
hmm
my opinion on them hasn't changed. I think USC has a little bit more talent or a little more cultivated talent than LSU. Again, LSU has to replace, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Jaden Daniels. I mean, that's
hmm
that's pretty substantial. But it's also like we were talking about this off air. LSU's got to replace both of its coordinators. I think that what Joe Sloan was promoted from within with Mike
hmm
Denbrock going to Notre Dame, and then obviously Blake Baker coming in from Mizzou to replace whatever the hell that was last year. But also USC's got to replace Alex Grinch. Glad that man's not stealing any more Christmases ever. I mean, you know what Grinch is short for? Bum. What a bum. He's just absolute suck. But Deion Tomlin looked great, and little nervous on the sidelines. He's like, man, I gotta keep Lincoln Riley from Lincoln Riley himself because that's inevitable. But we'll talk about USC in a minute. But yeah, it was like Brian Kelly just he took responsibility for the loss afterwards. But it was kind of like in the moment, it's like maybe the pop year is not going to be what it has been at other places.
hmm
Like I look at LSU as the equivalent of the Penn State of the SEC right now. That's kind of where I see them like finishing top 4 or 5 in their conference. Penn State probably 3 or 4, depending on how you view USC. But it's like playoff caliber. But again, this is your third year here. This is Dan Lanning's third year at Oregon. You're not seeing him making a bunch of excuses. By year 3, Kirby Smart already played for a national title and almost won. So it's like I understand that LSU is a little bit different, but this is one of the best programs in the country.
No, it absolutely is. And I think like one of the things you're talking about kind of, I mean, I think one of the things that is indicative of what you're talking about is Brian Kelly has not won a season opener at LSU yet. And granted, LSU tends to play a very difficult season opener. They want to get that strength of schedule up and like get themselves ready for SEC play. It's one of the things I really like about LSU is that they're not afraid of these games. Like we saw them play Florida State last year and lose, and we saw them play USC obviously last night and they lost. But like I respect them for trying it, but at the same time, maybe it's something of the way Brian Kelly is building these teams because one of the things I'm looking at, not just with the coordinators, but like you're breaking in so much new stuff on this offense that like it's not just the quarterback. Like Garrett Nussmeier, if he was returning with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. and it was just Jaden Daniels leaving, that'd be one thing because he still gets to practice with those guys. He still has a little bit of rapport with those guys. But you're bringing in like basically an entirely new receiving core that Garrett Nussmeier has not played with. And I just think like there's a lot that has to coalesce there. But that's kind of the way Brian Kelly has been building these teams. Like when Jaden Daniels came in, it was you had to coalesce around a new quarterback. You had to like figure out how this offense is going to work because obviously it's a different offense than what you ran with Joe Burrow, than what you're running now with Garrett Nussmeier because of Daniels' mobility. So like I wonder if it's a preparation thing for the season because it just seems like they are just like a step behind where that you would want them to be coming into these season openers. That's why they haven't won one because they are playing these tough games.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one thing about Brian Kelly that I'll always give him credit for is his team gets better as season progresses. They figure out their identity pretty quickly and he adapts. I think
hmm
he's very critical of himself here, and there's a lot of self-awareness here, which is why it's I'm trying, Jennifer, and you're not doing great, sweetie. Because
Yeah.
So I still think they're going to win about 10 games this year. Obviously, USC got a win I didn't think they would, and that puts them probably to 9-3 right now in my book. Could certainly be 10-2 and certainly playoff caliber there. So, any other thoughts about Brian Kelly before we unpack USC here in a second?
No, I think you kind of just echoed what I was going to say. Like, I'm not out on LSU because of this game. Like, the defense did look improved, and I think it's only going to get better as well as they get more comfortable with Blake Baker. Like, they looked competent. That was honestly my takeaway from both sides of the ball. This or from both teams in this game was that holy hell, it's two competent defenses from two defenses last year that were the exact opposite, like two of the worst in the country.
There is one thing that did happen, though. I think I kind of went back and forth on this, and now I feel like an idiot because that's the point of the show. We are idiots, but maybe I should have been more higher on Ole Miss than I was on LSU. We'll talk that up here in
Mm.
segment four here a little bit, because I'm sure we got some stuff that we were idiots about that we're going to make some adjustments. But we are going to move on to our next topic with some do Hast or do Hast. Cody, is this the brand of USC football we're going to see for the rest of the season?
I'm gonna do host it with one S because it honestly it played exactly into what I've been saying for months now about USC. It looked like Lincoln Riley was coaching a quarterback who is not the most physically talented in the world. It's not a Kyler Murray. It's not a Caleb Williams. But it looked like a guy who is absolutely capable of going out there and doing what he's told. Like you've got two reads on this play. If one's not open, throw it to the other because it's going to be open. And that's what Lincoln Riley's offense is. It wasn't difficult, and like he just took what was there, the easy throws constantly. And so like I think that's definitely going to be part of it. But the other thing is like we expected improvement from the D'Anton Lynn defense. Like I mean, almost impossible to be worse than Alex Grinch. Like I think you and I could go out there and coach the defense and be better than Alex Grinch. But like I do think that we saw it happen a little bit sooner than I think I probably would have said. Like LSU put up yards, but it was very bend don't break. And last year and the year before at USC, we saw it break constantly. And so like I think this is the brand we're going to see. Like the offense is going to take what's given to them constantly with Miller Moss. Like Miller Moss was basically mistake free this entire game, and he just took the easy throw when it was there. That's what I want to see from this because if you have a defense that's improved, this offense is going to put up points against a lot of teams, particularly with USC's schedule, which is not the most daunting thing I've ever seen. And so, like, I think that at the end of the day, this is the brand that not only we're going to see, but the brand that is going to bring USC a lot of success this year as well.
I'm right there with you. Two Hast, one S as well. Bosco made a brief appearance on the show here. Moving over here, yeah. Bubba, the lovely Doberman that we're dog sitting for. Yeah, all the bigger breed dogs that me and the Arizona State podcast are hanging out with are great. It's just some of the other ones. There's two I'll say off air that are don't ever buy these two type of dogs. But yes, this Doberman wonderful. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful buddy. We call him Bubba now, which because
We're
that's
we're a pro Bubba podcast. You know, we love Bubba.
you're damn right. But yes, I guess to kind of go back to USC, it's like I was of the belief that, it was going to be addition by subtraction with Caleb Williams, with Miller Moss, because Miller Moss, when USC is good, they play with a blue collar ethos. It's kind of why
Mhm.
Sam Darnold, they kind of worked there a little bit with Clay Helton. Caleb Williams has seemed to mellow out a lot more with the Bears. I think the NFL has kind of humbled him a little bit, but like just
Mhm.
the glamour of it all, that kind of creates a paper tiger there with USC, which is why I've kind of been out on Lincoln Riley. But I've always said his team can run the football with conviction, and that still is true. Zachariah Branch is special at wide receiver.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, I'm trying to sit there and think like outside of like Luther Burden the third, maybe if he's draft eligible, is he wide receiver 2 or 3? He's certainly up there. He's a maybe three behind Tetairoa McMillan. He's really good
Yeah.
too.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
got some McMillan notes coming later in the show. But no, like I actually think he's only a true sophomore, so we still have another year of this. So like he's only going to get better, which is absolutely insane. But like, yeah, I mean, the branch is a game changer. And I think the other thing, like, when we're comparing it to LSU, like I talked about, Nussmeier has to get accustomed to working with CJ Daniels and the other guys that they brought in the portal. And a lot of this receiving core is new faces at LSU. The top of the receiving core at USC is familiar faces. We know all these guys. Miller Moss has been working with these guys for a couple years now. And so, like, it's not shocking to me that they had a rapport because they've been working together. And, like, when you have that level of playmaker who also already has, like, comes into week one with a level of comfort with the quarterback and with the offense, that's a huge advantage in your favor.
Absolutely. The one thing though that has me maybe going to S at some point, like this can evolve right now. I feel very confident with one S, not two. It's all about D'Anton Lynn. So I looked it up.
Mhm.
So it's Anthony Lynn Jr. That's his nickname. So
Yeah.
like, and obviously we know what his dad's meant, in the NFL, former Chargers head coach, really successful, really well thought of interim head coach and offensive coordinator with the Bills and everything like that.
Hmm.
NFL lifer. There's a certain likability with D'Anton Lynn that like really helps elevate USC where like they kind of get away from that sometimes. But I was sitting there, I'm watching him on the sidelines. He's like, I feel he puts so much pressure on himself. He's like, if I don't perform, then it's just going to devolve into the nonsense that it was. Because again, he was at UCLA last year, kind of in the same sort of like, very much air raid spread attack with Chip Kelly. If he kicks some serious tail, it would not shock me if he was a P4 head coach. I think
No.
maybe we're about like we didn't have him there on he got eventually at some point, but like if he has a season, like he could win the Royals and certainly get there just because we know like what's capable. I mean, hell, we
Mhm.
could Riley's brother win the Royals and he sucks. His Clemson offense is terrible.
That's factually correct. Yes. Confirmed that Garrett Riley is not his brother. Tough scenes for Garrett. But no, you're absolutely right. I also wonder, like, I think with D'Anton Lynn, and this is, a warning sign for USC in the future, but like, does he want to follow in his dad's footsteps and head to the NFL level? Like, I could see him making the jump to be an NFL DC, especially if he turns this USC defense around. Like, I think that there are going to be teams that come calling to come, hey, we've struggled with defense. We think we have the talent, but we've got to get this together. Call D'Anton Lynn. Like, he obviously has the NFL bloodlines, NFL pedigree, so why not? So, like, yeah, I think that they are absolutely we're in a situation where he does have that type of future where he could be gone relatively quickly from here, which would be tough for Lincoln Riley. Hopefully he doesn't fall back to old habits and be like, Alex Grinch, come on back home, brother.
Yeah, you're right there. Maybe he does go NFL DC route. There's two teams I thought of like if there's a lot of pressure on these two NFL teams, they have new coordinators, and if it doesn't work, like if Jeff Hafley fails, maybe you just go hire
Hmm.
him. Maybe Matt LaFleur hires him at Green Bay, or if Jimmy Lake is another mistake, maybe Raheem Morris gives him a call and brings him to the ATL. I think that like yeah, that could be a very interesting pathway too. But I mean, like maybe D'Anton Lynn's still relatively a newcomer, needs a little bit more of like
Hmm.
recruiting and everything with that at the college level. But like I don't know, try to think who could open up like if I don't know, maybe Washington. Like if Jed Fish goes, maybe that's an
Yeah.
opportunity to go there as well. Big Ten, Big 12 kind of feels like a good interesting landing
Hmm.
spot for him. Basically, something that's not in Eastern time. Although Cal is plays in Eastern time league, but you get what I'm saying.
No, absolutely, I get what you're saying, and I'll push back slightly on Washington and this is a Washington thing, not a D'Anton Lynn thing. I think Washington should always hire an offensive-minded head coach. I think that's just when you see Washington at their best, it is an offensive-minded head coach that they have at the helm. So getting a defensive coordinator hire in there, not what I would do, but again, I don't think it would be a bad hire necessarily. I just think that that's where I would push back. But I think like more natural fit, I look in the Big 12. You look at those Texas schools that could open. You look at a Baylor, you look at a Texas Tech, you look at those kind of programs. I think D'Anton Lynn could come in there and like give them a bit of life, particularly Baylor. Like Baylor is interesting to me because I think D'Anton Lynn has, at least to this point, shown that he could be what they tried to get with Dave Aranda. Obviously, it hasn't worked out with Aranda, but he could be what they tried to do with that.
The only thing that I do like the fit potential, like the Dave Aranda mulligan. Can you occupy my
Yeah.
brain? There is one thing though. I do think that's a great point you made about Washington. I think Don James might have been defensive minded, but again, that's in the 70s and 90s. That's a completely
Mhm.
different realm. But yeah, you mentioned like Kalen DeBoer, you mentioned Sark. Anytime they've had an offensive mind, there, Chris Peterson, it's the same sort of
Yeah, Chris
thing.
Peterson. Yep.
There is one thing though. I think where D'Anton goes, he's got to go to a state where there's a lot of in-state talent. Like he can't
Mhm.
go to Iowa State. I don't feel like that's going to work.
No.
Like you got to go somewhere where like at least have Washington level talent in state or better, where like you can
Mhm.
produce some five stars and get them to come and stay in state. Like Texas, like a Louisiana, somewhere like that. I'm not saying he's going to replace Brian Kelly, but like you need to go to
Yeah.
school like that, like an Alabama place or a Georgia or a Mississippi. Like they have that there.
No, that's a very good point because I that's pretty much the advantage that he's coached with to this point. So like I feel like if you want a soft landing, a soft runway for him, that's definitely like a prerequisite that I think is needed for his success.
I know we got a very soft runway and a landing after this game. This next topic, we might crash and burn. I don't really know where we're going to go with this because this is going to be. I still don't even know. We tried to put this together. Yes, we're going to talk about some Ohio State here with some great. You could be on our team. Will Howard is the straw that stirs the drink at Ohio State, but he's a slow stirrer, all right. You beat Akron, but Vince Nairn's probably doing cartwheels in the street right now.
Shouts to Vince, man. No one hates the Zips more than that man.
No, no, he's doing cartwheels in the streets. Alicia D'Artolo's doing cartwheels in the streets. I'm not. The Braves lost 3-4 to the Phillies because Brian Snitker's over the hill.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, the Red Sox lost 2 out of 3 to the Tigers, so baseball's not baseball's winding down for sure.
I know, and we got NFL starting up this weekend with some Falcons and Cowboys, and we'll see what happens there. Oh God,
Oh.
who do y'all open up with?
I honestly, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I've been so dialed on college football that I haven't. I'm looking right now, but I want to say it's probably the Giants because that's who they open up with every year, but I don't know that for a fact. Oh God, we're failing miserably live on air.
That's fine. I know I'm opening with the
Oh,
Steelers. Yeah.
the Cleveland Browns. We get the AFC North between the two of us. So I'm not terribly afraid of that one. No Nick Chubb, Deshaun Watson with an arm that doesn't work. So, I think we'll be okay.
I mean, I'm terrified of my game. I'll be talking about this on the Blog and Dirty podcast on a Wednesday with editor of Still Curtain, Tommy Jagai. He knows everything about the Steelers, and it's going to be a great conversation. And we're going to debate Arthur Smith for about 15 minutes. It's going to be awful.
What debate is there to be had there, brother?
um, Yenzer is convincing himself that he's good, even though he's not. But I don't think he's as bad as he was in Atlanta. It's somewhere in between.
He's a better OC than he is a head coach, but he also doesn't have Derrick Henry anymore. So I'm wondering what it's going to look like.
It's kind of how we feel about Will Howard, man. It's like I'm sitting here and he's got talent. I don't know if he's as talented as Avery Johnson, who played pretty poorly, versus UT Martin. Shout out Ty Simpson's dad.
That's right.
But again, I think the big thing that's holding us back with really liking Ohio State's chances to win the national title, and again, they could, coaching.
Mhm.
And we know how great of a coach Chris Klieman is. There are some reservations out there about Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Brian Hartline, and we think Jim Knowles is a good coach, so
I
we
was
know
about to
that.
say, I have no questions about Jim Knowles. He's damn
Yeah.
good and consistently proves that.
So where do you want to go with this? We have to talk about Ohio State. Just what are your thoughts about that? Because again, we don't really. This is the one thing I just don't know for this after week one.
Yeah, so the thing I've been wrestling with is whether or not I think that Will Howard played poorly or whether or not this is just a new Ohio State offense. And I think that's where you come down on that determines how you really feel about Ohio State coming out of this. I do think it is the answer is probably a little bit more toward this being a new offense. Like Will Howard, when you look at what he did at Kansas State, he wasn't a dude who was putting up CJ Stroud numbers. Hell, he wasn't putting up Kyle McCord numbers. Like he was not asked to throw the ball a lot and he was asked to run. He didn't run a whole lot in this game. And a point that this is not going to shock you from who it's from, but Bud Elliott made on Saturday night. But it's something that I've been thinking about. And I think it makes sense, but it still has me in wait and see mode. I'm not thoroughly gung ho about this idea, but that Ohio State is just going to play a vanilla offense except in 3 games this year because they have 3 tough games on their schedule, 3 games that matter, 3 games to basically get them in the college football playoff. And so I think that there is a chance that maybe we don't see the full version of Will Howard, the guy who's running, the guy who is being a part of the run game and making that the new offense, which is what we were kind of excited about with Chip Kelly coming in as the new OC. Maybe we don't see that for a while. Maybe it is kind of just vanilla and we're asking Will Howard to maybe develop as a passer a little bit. Again, I don't see that happening a ton. And I think that might actually, if I'm, zooming out, like looking at the grander picture of things, I do wonder if that limits Ohio State's ceiling. Like, I do wonder if we get into the playoff, if they do have an offense that is not able to throw it around at the way we've seen Ohio State do. I do wonder what that's going to mean for can they, keep up with the Georgia? Can they keep up with the Texas? Can they keep up with like these elite teams that we think are going to be like national championship contenders? I don't know that for a fact yet with Ohio State, and I'd definitely wait and see there. But I do think that it was a bit jarring to see what Will Howard looked like in this offense, particularly with what we've seen. Like by all measures, if we're just looking at what we like, you replace Kyle McCord with this guy. Kyle McCord looked better than this last year.
Yes, that's exactly my point. I was sitting there thinking like Kyle McCord looked pretty good for Syracuse's win over Ohio U. Again, Fran Brown was like not even on my radar at Georgia to be a head coach, but the opportunity opened up. Obviously, Syracuse, Kyle McCord goes there because his best friend Marvin Harrison Jr.'s dad starred there, and obviously Camden, New Jersey, Philadelphia guy. Kyle McCord looked like a five-star against pretty decent MAC program. But again, I
Mhm.
sit there and I'm thinking with Ohio State, like the three games you mentioned, just for the record, I think you're saying were Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State, correct?
Correct. Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
I should have
Yes,
named those.
that's fine. I'm sitting there thinking maybe they want to kind of keep it bland a little bit, not really reveal anything to those schools. And maybe they'll have to flex it against, the Michigan States or the Marylands of the world against two pretty good offensive minds, Jonathan
Mhm.
Smith or Mike Sloxley. I'm not sure if they're on their schedule, but they would have been last year. But you get the point I'm saying there. I was sitting there thinking like this with Will Howard, since he can run, for whatever reason, I keep reminding it reminds me of potentially of what could have been a SMU Pony Express, with
Mm.
Travion Henderson and Quinshaw Judkins being the Eric Dickersons and the Craig James, with Will Howard being the Lance McElhenney running the point and everything like that. But again, Lance McElhenney kind of limited what SMU could be with those two absolute studs in the backfield. So I'm kind of right there with you. I know Chip Kelly was going to want to run the ball a bunch, but again, there may be too many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, you have three head coaches on your team, basically. Like Jim Knowles should be a head
Mhm.
coach. And Brian Hartline could certainly do that at the right spot. He has to be more the CEO type. Like maybe he replaces internally or he goes to Cincinnati. I just feel like the coaching of it all, I kind of wonder if that and maybe Will Howard's skill set limits Ohio State's ceiling just a bit.
No, and I think those are all fair points. The honestly, the most concerning thing to me, like I was definitely like, I had my it had my eye what Will Howard was doing. They didn't run the ball all as effectively as I was thinking they might. And when you think back about, like probably like the last 5 or 6 years of Ohio State teams, what's the one question we consistently have, even though they've turned out offensive line NFL draft talent? It's been the line. Like, can this line hold up against the Georgia? Can this line hold up against Michigan specifically? Like, and the fact that they weren't getting pushed around against Akron, but they weren't necessarily getting the push against Akron that I would want them to, because Akron's one of the worst teams in the country. Like let's be like Power Five, or excuse me, FBS teams in the country. Definitely not Power Four. But like Akron's one of the worst teams in the country. So you push this team around. And they didn't quite do it. Like, yes, Travion Henderson ended up averaging 8 yards a carry, but Quinshaw Judkins had a very minuscule day. I think ended up being like 4.2 yards per carry, and he's too talented for that to be happening. So, like, I do worry about the offensive line. I worry about what this run game is going to look like with this two-headed monster. To me, it didn't look like. I think where I ultimately come down on this is either A, they're purposefully just putting out a vanilla offense, or B, and but this is far more concerning. They don't know what they are offensively, and they don't know how to make all these pieces work yet. They have a runway to figure that out. They have time to figure that out. So like it's not like a death sentence. I'm not writing off Ohio State, but I do think that like what we saw against Akron is not what Ohio State wants Ohio State to be. I feel very confident in that.
We also got to talk about another coach on their staff who has been up for head coaching opportunities. That's their O-line coach, Justin Fry. Again,
Hmm.
he was the guy we thought could have gone to Indiana, though went to Kurt Signetti. He was a finalist for that gig. BC, we saw him tied there. And it's like again, I'm trying to make will the pieces fit or will Lars Ulrich make the pieces fit?
That's right.
Because maybe he wants to kind of have more of a pro style offensive line, whereas Chip Kelly maybe want to go more spread. So you're dealing with, okay, do we want our offensive lineman to be 320 or 275? And bulking season or these are college kids. They got to figure out what to do with their body, and this is the prime of their life, and you're making them look like line meat.
No, dude, and like the other thing, like that I had forgotten about until we got into the game, McLaughlin, the kid from Alabama who got his lunch ate against Michigan in the college football playoff last year, that's Ohio State's starting center now. Like they brought him in the transfer portal, and he got like, and talk about like of the five guys who were starting on the offensive line, he was the biggest issue there. And like he wasn't that good at Alabama. And so like I'm looking at this and like we'll talk about Michigan, I'm sure plenty throughout this season. I'm not scared of Michigan, but I do think Michigan's defense is still quite good. And like if you're having a guy who was bullied by Michigan in the college football playoff, and now you're watching the center go to another program at Ohio State and still show some of the same issues, that's a worry for me. But yeah, I'm not willing, like it's week one. I'm not willing to, pronounce Ohio State dead. I'm not willing to say, oh, they're definitely winning a national championship yet. But I think there was enough that we saw, like enough limitations with Will Howard, enough questions about the offensive line and the run game that we're right to be at least a little not even it's not even dubious. It's more just like a wait and see mentality. Like I'm not willing to make a definitive statement on Ohio State yet, is where I come down from this.
You know what? Same. You bring up a great point with Seth McLaughlin. I mean, he's over there snapping the ball on the ground like a hockey puck, like it's some 2013 Atlanta Falcons Mike Person nonsense. So think about this. So he goes to Ohio State. I don't know why he left because you're going to have to go up against Mason Graham, who is just going to absolutely flay you in the parking lot of a White Castle. Yeah, that's very Columbus.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But story time with Buhler. So obviously T. Bob Aber, a very successful broadcaster in our business, and former LSU alum, former center, probably
Yeah.
having a tough day after last night. But obviously his dad, Bobby Aber, Coach O's best friend in high school, played for the Falcons and Saints. And his dad was obviously like a big radio guy here in Atlanta for a while there. And they were talking about this. And I think when he was playing with the Falcons, he's like, yeah, there was one game we're playing the Giants and Lawrence Taylor's over there. And the offensive lineman's like crying. He's like, I can't block this man.
Hey, don't cry, man. No one could. No one could. North Carolina legend.
No, nobody could. I mean, he basically hurt Joe Theismann's ability to walk for the rest of his life.
That's factually correct. Yeah, there was only one thing that could stop Lawrence Taylor, and it wasn't anything on the football field.
It was something made in a laboratory, as far as I'm concerned.
Correct. Correct.
And I don't, and we're just going to leave it at that. And I don't know if there was a page dedicated to that in from Ward Manual's manual, but that's kind of where we're going to go with this next topic. Yes, we may be idiots, but I think after essentially a whole week's worth of games, we still got Florida State, Boston College tonight. I don't think we have either of them making the playoff anyway, but
No.
maybe there's a few adjustments we could make or how we would project the CFP going forward. So I guess I'll start with the AQ spots. How are you feeling about those for you?
So I definitely took NC State out of there, and Miami. I mean, I had to put Miami in there. I think that uh, what we saw from Miami was one of the more impressive things that I saw in week one. They they avoided the Mario of it all, which is a big feather in their cap. But I think that they also like we talked all offseason about how talented this roster was, and it was just living up to it. To see that talent just like live up to it in week one, like they didn't just beat Florida. Like if they had beaten Florida by like 7 points, I wouldn't feel this way. They completely dominated them in every phase of the game through for 60 minutes. Like there was no letting off of the gas. There was no it was just a thoroughly impressive effort. Cam Ward looked that damn good, and so like I have Miami taking NC State spot. I'm going to put Ohio State ahead of Oregon, but I feel like those are going to interchange for me in the two like between the automatic qualifier spot out of the Big Ten throughout the season. Like Oregon only beat Idaho by 10. But I also think Oregon probably didn't show a damn thing. Like I think Oregon is kind of in the same position as Ohio State where they're not showing anything. Why would you show anything against Idaho? And maybe Idaho's a little bit better than we thought. And like that just kind of happens. But like maybe Oregon isn't as good as we thought. So like I don't know that. But we obviously just talked about all the questions we had about Ohio State. But at least Ohio State took care of business at the end of the day. They scored a
Right.
46 point win. So like I'm not going to see that and not like the margins between those two teams to me are so thin that I'm going to put Ohio State in over Oregon. But it's like, we're flipping a coin every week basically with those two.
So just for the listeners at home, so one would be still Georgia for you. Two would
Yes.
be
One is comfortably Georgia.
one is comfortably Georgia. Two would be Ohio State. You would have Three is at Miami or K-State.
I've got three. I've got Miami at three. I
And
think
then
that they were more impressive than honestly, any team in the Big 12 to me.
then you have K-State four, and then
Hmm.
Boise's are 12. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry.
My,
Yes, I forgot about G5. I still have Boise. Their defense is trash, but I still got them as the G5 representative.
yes, my top four aren't changing. Like but I have the order is switching a little bit. So I still got Georgia one. I've got Ohio State two. I think I saw enough out of both of those teams. I am going to move Miami up from four to three, and I'll move
Mhm.
Utah down to four. Again, the Big
Yeah.
12, I still don't really know per se. I do think Oklahoma State is probably could potentially be a lot better than I thought. Again, we thought this was like a Gators hunting rabbits sort of game, but maybe the Pokes are certainly the Big 12 might get to it this year. I feel that
Hmm.
there's a decent chance there unless they cannibalize. And then my big change gonna put Boise there over Liberty at winning the G5. I think the Ashton Genty of the world, potentially winning the Doak Walker, potentially getting to the Heisman ceremony. I think that that helps them. I don't really trust Spencer Danielson more than I like Jamie Chadwell a lot more. But again, Boise State's the bigger brand. They're probably in the best league right now. So that's kind of where I'm kind of going with the group of five. Again, it's probably going to be some change between Boise State and Liberty and Memphis until one of them loses. Then I don't know. That's kind of how I'm feeling with group of five.
No, and we'll find out a lot more about two teams that we just talked about, Boise and Oregon, because they play in Eugene this week. So like we'll find out a lot more about both of those teams, I think, this week.
That is true. Yes. So working our way through like the 5 through 11. I still got Notre Dame five. I think that they
Okay.
won a tough game there over A&M. Six. I think I've still got six is going to be Texas over Oregon. So I've got them
Mhm.
flipped. But again, those are kind of like those like five, six, seven are kind of basically going to be Notre Dame and then the runner-up projected for the SEC and Big Ten. How are you
Yeah.
kind of looking with those teams?
So I flipped Texas up to five. Texas was quite impressive to me. Like they just boat raced Colorado State. It wasn't even close. And like Colorado State's not a great team, but they're a decent team. They're a team that can score. And I think the biggest thing that really stood out to me is that Colorado State offense had zero success despite everything that Texas was having to replace on the defensive side of the ball. And like I think we knew what we were going to expect from this offense. Like it's going to be good. It's a Sark-led offense with Quinn Ewers, a ton of experience, a ton of talent. But I think that the defense stepping up in the way they did, I that was enough for me to move Texas number five. Obviously, I have Oregon at number six, taking the spot of Ohio State there. Still Notre Dame at seven. So like I think we see that 5 through 7 range. It's kind of interchangeable at this point.
Yes, I was like sitting there. I'm like, did Cody that high Notre Dame too? I feel it was top eight. I wasn't necessarily sure I had them at seven, but okay, I feel a lot better about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I have them at seven, and then after that is when I have some real
Yeah,
shuffling going on.
yeah.
I have Penn State at eight. I was thoroughly impressed. They even with a like 3 hour weather delay, both sides of the weather delay looked the same. And it was Penn State just beating the piss out of West Virginia, man. And like there's a chance that West Virginia overachieved a little bit last year. I think that's definitely in the cards. I think Neil Brown's a good coach and coached them to 9-3 last year. But at the same time, like this was a game that was at least semi-close last year for a good portion of it, and they kind of Penn State pulled away late. It wasn't this level of dominance. The offense looked explosive, man. Drew Aller was throwing explosive plays. They were getting Drew Aller's legs involved a little bit, which when you think about Andy Kotelnicki and what he had at Kansas with Jason Bean or Jalen Daniels, the quarterback mobility was a huge part of what they were able to do. So getting Aller on the move, I really like to see that. Allen and Singleton in the backfield are just monsters. Like, my God, having to tackle those dudes seems like a nightmare. But this is I I saw enough in that game. I mean, it was one of the bigger games of the year or of week one, excuse me. And I think that seeing Penn State's offense come out there and look that good that quickly with a new coordinator with some new pieces, I'm very high on this because we know the defense is going to be good, and it looked that good too.
I have Penn State moved up to eight as well.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, I was sitting there. I'm like, again, I thought West Virginia had the potential to upset them. They were definitely maybe a contender for me out of the Big 12. Certainly can be. Neil Brown, again, my biggest idiot of the year, was saying that he needed to be fired. And turns out I think he's kind of got it figured out. But you're right there, man. Andy Kotelnicki made Drew Aller look so much better. Like this is kind of like I expected this. Like JJ McCarthy made a huge leap up in year three. same
Hmm.
sort of thing. I think Drew Aller is more talented than JJ McCarthy, but not as like consistent. I think that's kind of been
Yeah.
his issue. He's also got a hell of a broccoli cut, dude.
Oh, dude, he is. Well, I mean, so did McCarthy. That's just kind of. I think we could just kind of got to get used to it with these new wave of quarterbacks.
But also, absolutely, yeah. I was sitting there thinking, it's not quite Lad's level though. Lad is the original the original broccoli cut. He probably got bullied for that back in Chattanooga. No question.
Lad is king broccoli. There's no question.
The broccoli beef, dude. I think, and that's why Jim Harbaugh drafted him.
That's right. Yeah, he's like, oh, broccoli beef. I met my wife at PF Chang's. Did you know this?
You too can beat your wife at PF Chang's. But you bring up a great point there. Like I was thinking about with LSU, they have the new coordinator changes too. And Joe Sloan was like internal, like, and Blake Baker had been at LSU before. Tom Allen was coaching a rival team in Indiana. He's way overqualified to do this. He should be a head coach. I
Yeah.
think that the Indiana of it all, like just put him in Cincinnati. He'll be so much better than Scott Satterfield. It's the same sort of thing. And obviously Andy Koltanecki, you may be more ahead of the curve on this. Like that's a future head coach too. But Penn State played complimentary football against one of the better teams in the Big 12. I firmly have them 8. But he got a 9.
9, this is another change for me. I have Tennessee. And I know you had them in your playoff field initially. I did not. But I'm moving them up to 9. I understand it was Chattanooga. I fully understand that. But Nico's good, man. He's
Yeah.
real good. And like I think he is like I couldn't escape the feeling in the like I watched the first half of this game. I didn't watch the full game. It's Chattanooga.
It's fine.
I've got too much going on. But in that first half, it was impossible for me to escape the feeling of watching a better version, a more talented version of Hendon Hooker running this offense. And we saw
Yes.
Hendon Hooker almost take this team to the 4-team college football playoff. And now you have a Tennessee team that is better on defense than they were in the Hendon Hooker year and may have a quarterback upgrade as well. That's a scary proposition for the rest of the SEC and the rest of college football because this team looks damn good.
Yes. I think I still have Tennessee at 9. That's where I had them. Feel exactly what I saw was told me. Again, we'll know a lot more with him after NC State. They might smoke the Wolfpack, to be honest with you, unfortunately.
It's leaning that way, yes.
Yes, Penn State, Tennessee, that's going to be really good. 10. I'm I'm gonna put Ole Miss at 10. I think the
Okay.
talent's there. I think that they know who they are. Jackson Dart had a really great game versus Furman. Again, the school, the Walton High School, took their logo from with Patriots colors. But yeah, I think Ole Miss just looked a little more cohesive than LSU, who I don't have in the top 12 right now. So Ole Miss would be 10 for me.
So I had Ole Miss at 10 previously, and I'm keeping Ole Miss at 10. And I think that, yeah, nothing I saw changed my mind. I think the one thing that made me even feel a little bit better was Furman's a decent offensive team. They always have been at the FCS level. And in these types of games, even if LSU or if Ole Miss blows out one of these teams, they tend to give up a little bit. They didn't give an inch in this game. And with the attention that we saw Lane Kiffin pay to the defense in the transfer portal this offseason, I think we're already seeing like signs of those dividends being paid.
Absolutely. I think we both probably have the same team for number 11. Yours is probably staying the same, and mine's now the USC Trojans. I think that
Yes,
that's
sir.
that was definitely they definitely maybe might be good. That was again, this is a win I didn't think they were going to have, but again, I guess I failed to realize that like USC playing in Las Vegas is essentially like Clemson or Georgia playing in Atlanta. It's the same
Mhm.
sort of thing. Not to say that LSU doesn't travel well because they do. They have fantastic fans. I've seen them pack the old Georgia Dome back in the day. They travel so well. But again, that's a tough spot for LSU to go to Las Vegas and play there,
Mhm.
keep the distractions under control. Whereas Lincoln Riley and USC, this isn't like as huge of a deal. So yeah, USC looked great. If the Big Ten is going to get 4 teams and they're going to be part of it. And again, everything that I've seen out of Penn State looks like they're going to be there too.
Mhm.
There's also a chance where Oregon or Ohio State really disappoint. I'm not ruling that out, but again, just one game, I don't know.
Yeah, I so if we're gonna talk about, that factor in all of this, I had to very, very hardly resist the urge to put Penn State at number 2.
Mhm.
That's like after what I saw on Saturday, that's honestly, that was my gut reaction is this the best team in the Big Ten? Because it might be if this is what the offense is going to look like. Again, it's 1 week, so I'm not going to, plant my flag there yet, but it's on my radar. We're thinking about it.
We're thinking about it for sure. I don't know if we have enough to do top four, but who are like the first two out? Anybody you think that like almost made this list for you?
So I think LSU is still has to be in the conversation. Like, I don't think this loss is going to kill them. There's a fly in here in case you can see it landing on my face every now and
It's
then.
it's okay.
Um,
There's a dog over here. I'm petting him every so often. Yeah, we are the Cajun beast. A little bit about French, a lot about animals.
that's right. Got that gumbo. Um, Go Tigers. But no, speaking of Go Tigers, like I do think LSU, like there was nothing I necessarily saw from that team, especially with the belief that like we've already talked about. I think this team is going to get better. We've seen it consistent with Brian Kelly and with all the turnover they've had, both with personnel and coordinators. Like I do think that this team is just going to get better. I think that they played a really good USC team in hostile territory and they lost on one possession. Like USC had the ball last. That's what it came down to. Garrett Nussmeier had 8 seconds and threw a pick. That was his one turnover of the day. But like I saw nothing from LSU that made me think badly of LSU. And that's kind of where I come down on. So like I still think they're very heavily in the mix. If any of these teams that we have in our top 11, top 12 do slip up, like aren't as good as we thought they were, then I think LSU is primed to absolutely take their spot.
Yeah, I couldn't. We can't drop them below 16 in this argument. They may drop in the rankings, but we kind of know what we saw. I don't know if I have them like first out, but I think they're probably in the same group of four. I kind of like Oklahoma State. Again, I mentioned that before. I
Okay.
think that they look a little bit better than Kansas State, who I don't have in my first four out. So I think Oklahoma State with Ollie Gordon, with Mike Gundy, again, a very easy game to slip up against versus South Dakota State. Uh, again, whenever you buy into Gundy, we don't really necessarily know. So I've got those. I've got those two. I guess the other two I had were still keeping an eye on Liberty a little bit, just because I feel like they can't fall that far out with Boise State. I've got Georgia Tech in there too. I'm thinking about yeah.
Oh.
Won the Marta Bowl, beat FSU, and again, I think they're taking the Virginia Tech spot, who I think is complete fraud.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. I think the ACC struggling. I have NC State as the kind of like ACC representative in this first four out. I understand the Western Carolina game was ugly. More so than what I've already mentioned with Ohio State and Oregon. I would be shocked if they showed anything that they're going to show against Tennessee. Like, do you really want to put something on film that Josh Heupel and Tennessee staff can use against Western Carolina? No, you don't. And so like I have like yes, they almost got caught. And like that's not good. You don't want that. But again, especially against Western Carolina, who is a bad FCS team. Like that's just not what you want. But I do think that we are going to see NC State look a lot different this week. Like I don't know what the spread is off the top of my head for the NC State Tennessee game, but I do think it's probably going to be a little bit skewed by that Western Carolina result when it probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'd probably say Tennessee minus 10 probably is what I would venture to guess. But again, Tennessee, they showed a bunch, but obviously this is Nico Iamaleava's first season starting, whereas this is like year five with Grayson McCall again in a new system. So
Mhm.
I understand that. So it's Letterman's Jackets versus Straight Jackets.
That's right.
That's
Pissed
good.
off versus pissing.
So your first four out, you've got NC State, you've got LSU. Who else
And
did
then
you?
I've also still got Alabama. I saw nothing from Alabama that made me think less of them. Again, it was not not anything I'm writing home about yet, but I did like Alabama looked like what you would want Alabama to look like in that game. And then I'm going with Oklahoma State. I'm with you there. Like they have me intrigued because South Dakota State is talk about good FCS teams. That is the FCS team, and I watched that game because I thought that, given what we know about Gundy and non-conference games, I thought, okay, maybe this is a chance for South Dakota State to pull something off here. That game wasn't close, man. Oklahoma State dominated top to bottom. Alan Bowman looked a lot better than I expected Alan Bowman to look. Even like we should know what Alan Bowman is at this point, but apparently we don't because he looked damn good in that game. And I understand it's against an FCS opponent, but we've seen Alan Bowman struggle against teams of that caliber before. So like I was impressed by that.
God, was Steve the Pirate glorious.
He really was, man.
Um, okay, I'm just on the fly. It's not Liberty. Alabama's the first four out. I just feel like
Yeah.
because again, I'm sitting there thinking like I know I missed somebody pretty substantial here. Maybe they're 15, maybe Georgia Tech 16. There's something there. Again, we're trying to figure this out on the fly. It's all about getting it right in the end. But yes, Alabama beating the brakes off of Western Kentucky, a team that like feels like it could be finishing runner up to Liberty and CUSA. Like again, a
Hmm.
pretty well coached team, scores a lot of points, didn't score any, and this is false
Yeah.
start.
Yeah, the defense showing up like they did when that was one of my bigger concerns coming into the year. It was good to see.
Yeah, it was good to see, and it's good to see your face working hard on Labor Day, and we're gonna go 4 for 4 here. This is a very impromptu segment, but kind of like one big takeaway from each Power Four league, one surprise, whatever. Let's just work alphabetically. Let's go. What's your big thought with the ACC that it needs to be touched on a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm sticking with Virginia Tech, and just what a disappointment. And like it's like what I just said with NC State does not apply to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech was playing an SEC opponent. I don't care if it's Vanderbilt. You're playing a Power Four opponent in the first week of the season. You have to be ready. You're one of the more experienced teams in the country, not just in the ACC. And you go on the road and you get your ass whipped. Like that's what are we doing here, Brent Pry? Like that is absolutely terrible. And like I'm not going to belabor the point that the ACC might just be categorically worse than we thought it was going to be, but Virginia Tech is like the poster child of that. Like people were picking them as a sleeper pick. People were picking them as a team. Like I had them in the ACC championship game and in my first four out, and now they're nowhere close to that because despite the fact that I still think this is a talented team, I still believe in Kyron Jones. I still think this is probably going to be an 8 or 9 win team. But like I think that when you look at the ceiling of what this team can be, and when you now look at the floor of what this team is, it's way lower of a floor than what I thought. And I think that obviously lowers the ceiling at the same time.
God, he is looking so defeated in that satin kimono, man.
Yeah, he is.
Fade to black, brother.
Oh my God.
uh, I like that. I'm going to obviously say something different for you with every single one of these, but really something that I haven't said yet, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here. Just little nuggets here there that aren't worthy of a
Mhm.
whole segment by itself. I think Georgia Tech knows exactly who they are. We mentioned this after the week
Mhm.
zero game. Again, a very tough game in state with the Marta Bowl with Georgia State going up against Del McGee in his first game there coaching the Panthers. But like it seems to be building on itself with under Brent Key. I think that like they this is the best I've seen Georgia Tech kind of be since the George O'Leary years. There was some stuff there with Paul Johnson where like they not called like lightning in a bottle, but like they made it work as well. But like
Mhm.
this is what I've wanted Georgia Tech to be since I was a kid, and they haven't been that. They've been an afterthought. It may be hard to get people into school. Maybe you get them a management degree like yours truly, and we go from there. But like what they're doing, like they're probably going to be ranked, if not this week, maybe after next.
Mhm.
They're very comfortably a bowl team right now. And I mean, they might be the next best team in the ACC beyond Miami, just because they know exactly who they are. And as long as Haynes King stays healthy and they play within themselves, Georgia Tech can be really good. And this is coming from a Georgia alum.
Yeah, no, that yeah, I know that pained you to say so, but yeah, I like absolutely like Georgia Tech. They've checked every box right now, and like you made the ultimate point. They know exactly who they are, whereas it looks like a lot of these teams, particularly in the ACC, have no idea who they are. Clemson clearly doesn't have a clue who they are. Like I don't think there's many worlds where that Clemson team is beating Georgia or keeping it close with Georgia even, but I do think that like they did themselves no favors by putting Cade Klubnik in a spot to be a star, to be a playmaker, and he's just clearly not that.
No, no, he's got some of that Jeff Driscoll overconfidence, cocky thing. Just a cocky idiot out there doing God knows what. Yeah, ACC. Yeah, let's talk very little about Clemson on this pod. Let's move on to who. What's your big thought about the Big Ten?
So my big thought about the Big Ten is Nebraska might be pretty good, man. I don't know if you got any eyes on Dylan Raiola, but for making his first start as an 18-year-old, he looked pretty damn good, dude. And like you look at Nebraska of last year, even if Nebraska had competent quarterback play last year, they're comfortably a 7-5 team. Like I felt very confident in saying that. But they had Jeff Sims and Heinrich Haarberg running the offense. And like you're not gonna go far when that's the case. Now they have a dude who is just ultra talented. And I'm sure there are going to be ups and downs for this team, but those ups could be really up. Like this team could pull off an upset that we're not just seeing coming right now. And I think like I have I think we were both a little bit trepidatious about Nebraska, the Matt Rule overhype train, Dylan Raiola, like he is a true freshman. What's this going to look like? I understand the competition wasn't great, but like at the end of the day, Dylan Raiola came out there and hit the ground running, put up big numbers, made some big plays, and that's something Nebraska just didn't have in their arsenal last year. So seeing that already, I'm I'm very curious to what this Nebraska team is going to do moving forward.
That fly is relentless, dude.
It's gonna kill me, dude.
Leave the door open for the dogs or whatever it is. That's how life goes. But I'm kind of right there with you. I'll get to my point here in a second. But with Nebraska, I feel very comfortably like they're a bowl team now, and I think they're
Mhm.
probably you're looking at them being 8-4. If they get that upset, maybe they go 9-3. I don't think they have the depth to make it, into that upper echelon of the Big Ten and get to the playoff and everything like that. But I would say for the most part, flies, that'll be on a 32 for 35 at some point. I'll probably make
Yeah.
it the Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies, baby.
Beelzebub and Lord of the Flies. Oh gosh. You, me, punk rock girl, this is false start. But yeah, I'll say like I did think Nebraska was very good. I think they'll probably beat Colorado this weekend, and we'll be writing a lot of
Mhm.
Deion Sanders hate posts or Deion
Yes,
Smith,
sir.
either way. But I'll say my big thing is Big Ten's gonna get 4 teams in the playoff right now. I
Mhm.
feel that like even though I don't trust Michigan and Davis Will Warren or whatever we call him, it could be Warren Matthews from There's Something About Mary with his baseball. It's just that offense is putrid, and it's gonna be like it's like them and Iowa are gonna switch. Like they're gonna probably
Mhm.
wish they had Cade McNamara, who actually looked pretty good. Iowa scored 40 points. They threw more touchdowns to wide receivers in the first half versus God, who do they play? Southern
Illinois
Illinois.
State, baby.
Yeah, Illinois
Illinois
State Ravens.
State.
Three more touchdown passes to wide receivers in the first half of that game than they did the last year and the year before that. Not combined, but they only threw 2 touchdown passes to wide receivers in 22 and 23. But the USC really showed me a lot. And more importantly, Penn State looks really good.
Mhm.
And by them, I was high on them, but maybe not to this degree. It really comes down to if Oregon and Ohio State live up to expectations. And I think that they will figure it out because they're simply too talented. But like, unless one of them just absolutely craps the bed, we're probably going to get 4 teams in from the Big Ten.
No, I like that a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like I was already obviously projecting that coming into the season, but I think like I feel more comfortable in that because I was going out on a limb with USC because I don't believe in Michigan. But like Michigan's defense still looks good enough to potentially carry them to like an 11 seed. Like that's in the cards. But I think the upside is limited there. But like the Big Ten looks strong. I think pretty top to bottom. Like Iowa looked better than I expected them to. Granted, it was Illinois State. We'll see what it looks like, when they get into El Assico against Iowa State. But I do think that generally the Big Ten looked pretty like one of the stronger conferences out of the bunch. Like I would say top to bottom stronger than the SEC, honestly.
Potentially, I think there's some stuff like Florida's really bad. I think that's the worst team
Yeah.
in the SEC. But like Vanderbilt's going to be a lot better. They're going to probably push for a bowl game because Diego Pavia, man, he majored in biology, so he's kind of smart, I guess.
I think so. I heard it brought up on some podcasts. I've listened to like five or six. So which one could is anyone's guess. But there was talk coming into this game that Diego Pavia might not be the starter. And whoever I was listening to made the point like game Pavia and practice Diego Pavia are two very different human beings. Like practice Diego Pavia is the guy who's taking a piss on the New Mexico logo in the middle of the practice facility. Game Diego Pavia is the guy who led New Mexico State to beat Auburn. Game Diego Pavia is the guy who led this upset for Vanderbilt. Like, dude is just a gamer. Like, you put him in the game, you give him the ball, he's going to make something happen. So yeah, Vanderbilt I think is absolutely live for a bowl with this guy at quarterback. With the way like another thing about Vanderbilt that I've been thinking about is like Clark Lee and Barton Simmons are guys, they got kind of screwed a little bit by the transfer portal because now they're basically just like a minor league system for like these three-star recruits that they develop and identify the talent and develop for a year. Like we watched London Humphreys catch a touchdown for Georgia this week after he spent a year at Vanderbilt. Like that's kind of the new norm. And like they got hired before the transfer portal was as rampant as it was. And imagine if you had some of these guys like staying in there. But the fact that they're getting a Diego Pavia in there, the fact that they do have some playmakers around them. Cedric Alexander, I believe, is the name of the running back, who was a pretty highly touted freshman last year. Didn't have a huge role, but did perform when he got the opportunity. He looked really good. So like, yeah, the SEC looks good too, but I think like the Big Ten matching the SEC at the very least, like was not something I had necessarily flagged.
I think that's fair for now, and we'll go to the Big 12. I think I know where you want to go. There's a team that was pretty good there late at night. I think that's where you're leaning.
Yeah, Arizona is going to be just a beautiful ball of disaster, dude.
Hell
Like
yeah.
this offense is looks unstoppable. Like Fafita to McMillan, my God, dude. McMillan finished the night with 300 yards and four touchdowns, two of which were over 75 yards. Like, dude is just an absolute monster. He's going to be a first round pick. He is so damn good. Fafita probably won't be a first round pick because he's like my height, but that's okay. He's still probably going to get an opportunity in the league. This offense is going to put up points. Holy hell, this defense is bad, man. We were worried. That was like our worry about Arizona coming into the season was they lost. Like Jed Fish, frankly, took a lot of the defense that was pretty decent last year for Arizona with him to Washington. So that's going to be a troubling side of the ball. But it's very fitting that Arizona is now in the Big 12 because this is going to be some vintage Big 12 football whenever anyone plays Arizona. It's going to be who gets the 60 first, and that's who's going to win the game.
Yeah, I was sitting there thinking like, yeah, Fafita I think could come back for another year or two, like, and he'll
Mhm.
probably get drafted. He'll kind of go like Dylan Gabriel. He'll play here as long as he can, just because he flies under the bees at 6 feet.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rowe McMillan is unbelievable. He might actually be the first wide receiver taken. He's that
Yeah.
good, dude.
He's unbelievably good.
I did think that's good. I'm gonna say this. I guess my big takeaway is I don't think we can trust Avery Johnson at all.
Oh, okay.
I feel that like there's just a lot of variance there. I feel like it's kind of like early Bo Nix, where it's like there's a lot of talent there, there's a lot of special, but then there's like the whole under pressure, I'm gonna panic, run around, throw the ball, try to make something happen. Again, he's only a sophomore, so he can figure this out. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, he's gonna have a great game and he's gonna have a terrible game. And I just feel like
Mhm.
there's just so much up and down with him. This might hurt K-State's chances of getting to Arlington, particularly if Arizona is that explosive offensively.
Yeah.
And if Utah is as solid as a rock as we think they might be, or at least I do. And Iowa State, I feel like there's just Chris Kleiman can coach him up as much as he can, but again, this is only his first year starting, so it's going to be a roller coaster ride there too with the teeny bopper extraordinaire, that some kind of lover there in Manhattan.
Dude, shouts to the Tiger Beat King, Avery Johnson out here. But yeah, no, like I'm not out on K-State, but I do think that your point is well taken, and I agree with is that there might be a lot more volatility than I was expecting with this team, and it's because of Avery Johnson. Like the volatility is going to be there. Like there's going to be some games in the Big 12 where he gets hot and they beat a team by like 30 that they were favored by like a touchdown over. But there's also going to be a team that they were favored by 20, 20 plus, and it's a one possession game in the fourth quarter because Avery Johnson has made a lot of mistakes. So I think you're absolutely right. I think the reason I still have faith in them to be the Big 12 representative in the college football playoff is Chris Kleiman. Like I just
Yeah,
trust that man. I trust that man with my life. And so like not only do I think that him and Joe Klanderman, I believe is their DC, like I think Klanderman will figure out the defense. Like the defense was a little suspect at times in this game, but a lot of new pieces on that side of the ball. I think they figure it out there, which will obviously help Avery Johnson, give him a little bit of cushion. But on top of that, like I trust Kleiman enough as an offensive mind that I do think that there is something to be said for just as if that volatility continues throughout the entire season, just giving Avery Johnson less opportunities to be volatile. And so, like, that's kind of where my faith comes in there. But I do think, like, if the general thesis of your point, which I think it is that this team is just going to be too volatile, when you're looking at like steady teams that we know what to expect, like in Arizona and in a Utah, potentially Oklahoma State, but there's always the Gundy factor of volatility
Yeah.
there. But I do think that like I trust climate enough to like find ways to mitigate that volatility.
Yes, still very high in Kleiman, still pretty high on Avery Johnson, but I guess I got to pull it back a little bit. And we're going to go on to the SEC. I have no idea what I'm going to say. Maybe you do. I'm just going to react.
Yeah, so you were talking about the Big Ten getting 4 teams in. Dude, the SEC might get 6 teams in. Like
Oh my God.
legitimately. Like this conference looked like what you'd expect. Like the fact that you have a Vanderbilt upsetting a Virginia Tech, the fact like outside of Florida, there was no team I was looking at and I was like, oh, that's a good football team. Like Florida, I looked at and I was like, oh, they're hellacious ass, as we said many times on Saturday night. But like I think that when you look at like you look how good Georgia is. Like I don't see Georgia losing a game. You look at what Texas did. I think Texas is going to their one loss might be to Georgia. And I don't really see many others coming. Texas A&M, I was impressed by even in a loss. Like I think that the fact that Connor Wegman in the offense didn't look good, I think is more of a Notre Dame defense issue than it is a Texas A&M offense issue. Like I just saw so much from this conference top to bottom where I'm like I can't quite rule this team out of being a playoff team yet. Like LSU and Texas A&M being shining examples. They're 0-1, but like I'm looking at them and I'm looking at what I saw and I'm like, I'm not sure that this isn't a playoff team because it absolutely could be. And then you throw in the teams that we already expect to get there, the Texas, the Georgia, Ole Miss, Missouri looked good, so like you can throw them in that mix with LSU as well. Like I just think there's so much talent in this league, so many top tier teams that yes, they are going to cannibalize themselves a little bit, but with the strength of the conference overall, I do wonder if the rankings committee is like, man, if we're trying to get the 11 best teams or the 12 best teams in the country, are 6 of them not in the SEC?
That's certainly within the realm of possibility there too. I mean, obviously, we're not even giving the credit to Alabama or Mizzou that they probably deserve right now.
Yeah,
Again, we got to let this thing marinate a little bit, but I could certainly see that. I think the only two teams who didn't look good in the SEC this week and were Florida and South Carolina. South Carolina
yeah,
barely beat Old Dominion, but Mississippi State looked good. We know that they have a soft schedule. I think if Jeff Levy and they have the offensive identity, that could be a bowl team. I'm not ruling
yeah,
that out. Arkansas just absolutely annihilated somebody on Thursday, scored a lot of points with Bobby P. I mean, they could upset somebody too. But yeah, Vanderbilt got a big win as well. Like again, across the board, I think the SEC is in a pretty good shape. Six may be high, but again, that would require basically the Big 12 and the ACC getting one in, which right now that's what it would be.
yeah.
So trying to do the math here. I guess that doesn't matter. I guess my big thing with the SEC is there's going to be at least three coaches fired by the end of the year.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
it's Billy Napier and Shane Beamer are cooked. Like there's no chance. And I don't really know who the third is, but like right now, like it could be Sam Pittman, but that's a pretty good win right there. That's going to buy him some time. I just feel like the pressure of like having so many teams be that level. Like we saw it kind of get to Brian Kelly a little bit. They're not going to fire him, but like you're sitting there and you're thinking like, okay, look at the upper half of this league, and we're not even close. Like
hmm,
that puts maybe Brent Venables like they're not going to fire him because of all that money and stuff like that. But if you have a really bad coach at this point with how good the league is in this new playoff format, you got to make changes quickly. It'll be like
yeah,
quarterbacks in the NFL. We're like, okay, Kenny Pickett is hellacious ass. Let's move on with him. Desmond Ritter can't play. We have to find out. We have to abide by the Norman Schwarzkopf of let's fail fast
yeah,
because the day and age of just Gus Bradleying it and just waiting to see what happens just doesn't work. And the SEC, especially now, like people could get fired after 1 year or two. It's I'm very confident that like the SEC is going to have some major job openings after the season.
no, 100%. Like you honestly, one like thought exercise I was going through the other day was, if Mark Stoops was hired in like 2019, say, would he still be at Kentucky? But
No,
like I think he single-handedly elevated this program from when he was hired and got them to this point that I think he's just kind of a made man in Lexington right now. But like what you're saying is absolutely true. The pressure has never been higher in the SEC. I think the only place where you can comfortably go and lose, which we've seen, is Vanderbilt. Like Vanderbilt knows that it's a long, arduous road to get anywhere remotely close to competitive, and it seems like that's paying off for them, to be clear. But like I do think that like the expectations in this league, whether warranted or not. Like we've talked about, South Carolina maybe should lower their expectations, but they shouldn't lower them to where Shane Beamer has this program currently. And so like the leash is shorter than it's ever been.
I think that's fair. I think with Vanderbilt, as long as Candice Story Lee and Clark Lee, they're both at Vanderbilt about the same time. A lot of Lees going on there, one with an E and one with two E's. As long as Vanderbilt could do that occasionally, like if they could beat Kentucky and they play Tennessee at least moderately competitive,
Hmm.
this can sustain. But like the day and ages of the Mark Stoops and the Dave Clawsons getting all the time in the world, that's over in college
Yeah.
football. And that's never more apparent than in the SEC. And speaking of pressure, I can't believe we're doing this, but diamonds, Cole becomes diamonds, and we knew a lot about some Cole. We're going to dive into like probably the last little chapter of some untold tales of Homer Hickham. We'll probably talk about that more in the off season, but we had some stuff that we have to talk about. Again, before we begin, Cody and I definitely went to high school, and these are true stories. The events described took place at Homer Hickham High School in Statesville, USA, from 2004 to 2009. At the request of the survivors, the names have been changed. Out of the respect for the dead, the rest has been told exactly as they occurred. It makes me laugh every time I read that.
It's unbelievably good.
Okay, so we had three things we're going to talk about today. Our strength and conditioning coach, Lawrence, the Bob Lee interview, and then obviously the disaster 4-8-07 season. So we talked about the Sitco and the guy who built the Sitco there in Statesville, USA. That was Coach Lawrence. Didn't have a last name. He was just Lawrence, and he looks kind of like Diedrich Bader because that's who he is.
Because that's it. That's his actual identity.
May or may not have been a witness protection, but either way,
I mean, it would explain a lot. The Citgo ownership, like that seems under the radar enough to be in witness protection. He was always talking about blocking two dudes at the same time, though, that which really always kind of I was like, man, I'm not a big guy. I don't know if I have that in me. And he was like, two dudes at the same time. And so like that was I can imagine him getting into some trouble at some point in his life and ending up in witness protection.
I could totally see that. With strict conditioning, he was all about running in the mines. Like that was the big thing. He's like, this will make it better up there. You know. The other thing about him was I don't know how he did it, but he always had a TV down in the mines and he was watching the local access news.
Oh
There
yeah.
wasn't electricity, but he'd plug it into like a drill or something like that, and he was always watching the news down there in the mines.
Yeah, I think he drilled a hole up through the mines up in there and just had an antenna, like a really long antenna going up through there to get the local access news. Yeah, it was quite impressive to see him do that. He was also, anytime someone jogged, he would tell us, hell no, I think you get your ass beat for doing something like that. But I think we learned a lot from Lawrence. The resourcefulness of the TV down in the mines, making sure he could watch his program. I think that is super important. I think that surviving through witness protection, I learned a lot from that. Uh, I wouldn't say that verbally he ever gave me any life lessons. Probably quite the opposite, frankly. It's, when Dietrich Baber starts talking, you don't really want to learn about your life lessons, but his behavior taught me a lot about life.
Yeah, he didn't really give me a lot of life lessons. He gave me a lot of copies to a Vibe magazine.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Which I mean is a life lesson in and of itself.
On the weekends. So basically, he was our strength and conditioning coach. He was a community coach because he kind of graduated allegedly from Homer Hickham. He was over there on the sidelines doing four. He was always doing that, and I was watching Kung Fu out there. He taught Cole the Oxen Kung Fu for sure. But
Hmm.
really, really, the big thing with Coach Lawrence was he taught us a lot of bad things. He taught us about like going to the mines. We come back from Coach Giamatti's class. We fail our spelling test because we can't spell Peloponnesian because it's still so hard. He's like, you gave me enough on that. That's messed up, brother.
Hell no. No, he was yeah, I asked him once if I could see his diploma and he said that it was lost in the mail. And I'm pretty sure he was in his early 40s at this point, so I'm not sure what mail service he was using. But yeah, not sure if he graduated, but Yeah, enjoy those Vibe magazines, Bueller. I'm sure you still have them in your possession.
I know he always talked about blocking two dudes at the same time, and he always talked about wanting to have $1 million, and
Mhm.
I don't think he had one.
No, no. He would definitely eat the Taco Bell breakfast with us, and by that I mean whatever we didn't eat, he would eat the scraps.
That I think that was the guy that taught us to appreciate the nachos. Like Ollie
Hmm.
Gordon, he appreciates the worst item on their menu.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh
Absolutely.
God, do you remember that sound bit he said when Bob Lita came here for Outside the Mines? Yeah, he became like Joe Exotic's boyfriend. That one guy. He kind of became an international hit for just Coach Lawrence, and he was in quotations that didn't have papers like Gator.
Yeah, he was talking about he made mention of, I don't remember the exact quote, but he made mention of like living in the mines, and like and Bob Lee asked him about the black lung, and he said something about like, when you got two dudes living down here at the same time, you don't have to worry about it because you just feed off each other's air.
You feed off each other's air, their energy, and their warmth, even though it's just 50 degrees down there perpetually. It's great.
That's right.
So we had that really good season there in '06. We went 10-2.
Mhm.
Zach Efron was the quarterback. We beat the White Flags from Lee. Basically beat everybody. Maybe on Ampipe. I think that was the game that Kenny D broke his leg, and that was bad for
Mhm. That's
everybody.
tough.
Um, so again, I think the big thing is it was kind of like a precursor to Bishop Sycamore.
Yeah.
Also, there may have been things that Coach Biff did that weren't great, and maybe that's why they came. They kind of created the documentary that went out on a precursor to Netflix, and it wasn't called Science Stealer; it was called Mind Stealer.
Mine's too, yeah. And Biff was the controversial figure in this. I don't know if you're a Last Chance U guy, but and when they moved on to the second team, the dude who was coaching in California, I can't remember his name. He's active on Twitter. Don't follow him; it's terrible.
Yes, Coach Jason Brown. Yeah,
Yes, that guy. Yeah, don't give him a Twitter follow. He does not deserve it. But yeah, Biff kind of came off like that in the Outside the Lines episode. We despite the fact that we were a obviously it's mining country, we were a very white population, just tends to be that area of the country. He threw around a lot of racial slurs, Coach Biff did, and it wasn't great.
no, no, it wasn't. I mean, his previous employer. I understand that, like, that's just one of the reasons why he left because he wanted to become a better person. But really, the problem was again he tried to semi legally adopt us.
Yeah.
Try to adopt us like Coach George Knox did back in the day with JP and JGL. But that was
JP's coming too, brother.
JP's coming too. They were great. They had a really good rapport there for quarterback to wide receiver. Too bad JGL could really only throw the ball about as far as Derek Carr. But like I think that was the problem. Like Coach Biff thought he could do this. And Coach Knox like had all the paperwork. He did everything. This is how you semi-legally adopt kids in mining country. And honestly, unfortunately, there was a lot of red tape there, and there was a lot of issues, and it all tied back to the University of Michigan. It was so unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, like legally, I'm pretty sure that what he was trying to pull off was a kidnapping. Like, if we were gonna diagnose it with legal terms, it was definitely just kidnapping. Because there was no paperwork. There was, the red tape was just a suggestion for him. He wasn't really worried about that, and it caused a lot of stir in Statesville. Like, he was kind of. Do you remember the couple years where he was basically ostracized? Like, he couldn't go to the grocery store without just catching side eyes from everyone.
Yeah, yeah, that was awful. The Sitco barely tolerated him because that was
Hmm.
but he kind of let out all of his energy there in the parking lot, and everyone's just like, "You need to go home, coach."
You got to go home. Like even Lawrence was like, "Hey man, you can come down to the mines with me, but you can't stay at the sit go."
No, no. Really, the big issue was it wasn't us. It was Zach Efron. That
Hmm.
was the big thing, and it was some major recruiting violation. I don't even think Jim Harbaugh was at Michigan at that point, but it might have been Rich Rod at that point. But either way, it wasn't going very good. They tried to
No,
sell him some burgers, and Zach at that point had become vegan, which we thought was Latin for chicken. So we didn't understand why his chicken tasted different than our chicken.
we also didn't approve of it because, as we well
Yeah.
know, chicken's a nervous bird. We've known that for a long time.
Yes. I remember we were watching this. Like we were, you came up to Georgia to visit me. We're watching it in my dorm room, drinking Mountain Dew. We saw this on the Netflix or whatever it was back in the day, and we're just like, we messed up.
We messed up. Thankfully, I don't think it was a very popular thing in Athens. We still went out, had a good time, weren't ostracized ourselves. But yeah, I mean, it caused quite a stir. It caused quite a controversy. And I mean, it's probably why you're not, very familiar, our listenership, why you're not very familiar with Homer Hickam High, because it really put a stain on the program.
It really did. It was a bad stain, and it really impacted our next year in '07. Obviously,
Mm.
you were there by yourself without me in '08. And you guys, you went like 6-6, 7-5, a little
Yeah.
bit better. But the '07 season, we went 4-8. We lost to everybody. And I think the problem was the left tackle you hated. He moved to center, and that was the guy that we named Cade Proctor, out of respect for the dead, because he's dead now.
That's right. Yeah. So RIP, but we miss him.
Oh, the worst part about that guy was he was like he would just say mean things about us, like behind our back, like just poisoning. So like, Cody, did you say that you just say that you like you made fun of my items at the Taco Bell breakfast, which was stupid because we always bulk together. And you said Bueller likes nachos. What a disgusting pig.
That's right. Yeah, it was a very it was a cancerous locker room presence, I think is what we're like. You're giving Center's got a lot of power in the offense, man. That's the guy getting the ball to the quarterback every play. And I mean, he played, talk about mind stealing. He played the mind games and really just tried to, for whatever reason, drive a wedge within our team. Between you and I, I think that was probably the roughest time for our relationship for sure.
Oh, no question. And I think Coach Giamatti was trying to figure out how to learn how to face adversity. So he went to Pittsburgh, Western PA, not that far away from home. Here come. So he learned from Bill Cowher, and I think Mike Tomlin was there. But he learned the Mike Tomlin way of handling adversity versus Bill Cowher, which is basically self-inflicted. So, yeah, Coach Giamatti would throw like firecrackers in the locker room, and that scared us because we were in the mines and it was too bright. But then we started recruiting some kids, and these guys were like 90% housebroken. And you know, they were named Antonio, and it was brown everywhere.
That's right. They were all Antonio. It was just Antonio 1, Antonio 2, and Antonio 3.
Dude, what was the team we played? There's one team we used to beat the snot out of every time. I think it was Homer Hickams. It was Colwood. Yeah, I remember this game.
Yeah,
And
Colwood.
Antonio, or the Antonio that not our Antonio, but that Antonio, pooped on my cleats.
Oh,
It,
God.
and I didn't have
Yeah.
any backup, and we couldn't get it clean because it was just coal dust everywhere. So I played with one shoe in that game, and I got stepped on. And again, we thought we were going to amputate my leg, and you're like, no, but it was pretty infected there. So I missed two more games. And again, you and the center Caden Proctor, oh, it was awful. You were
It was bad. And
it
like I
was.
remember I remember when Antonio, defecated on your shoe that, because I was being manipulated by Proctor. I think end of the day, I want to apologize now for what I said to you in that moment where I said, why don't you just eat it off? Because you eat the nachos and it's basically the same thing.
At that point, I really wanted us to get to the playoffs, and if you would have given me a chip, I would have done it. But I'm a team player, but I also was not doing very hot. Then I lost 10 pounds that year, and it was
Yep.
the anti-bulking season. I may have gotten mono like Sam Darnold.
Hey man, it happens to NFL quarterbacks all the time.
But yes, my scholarship got pulled, and I had to get into Georgia on academics, and that was I went from like a three-star recruit to a no star, and nobody loved me.
Yeah, yeah, I mean it didn't help my stock either, Thankfully, like the year later I rekindled my relationship with Coach Giamatti and got really back into the classics, and ended up going to get an English degree, a writing degree. So, I got it pulled together, but '07, man, it's a rough year on the field. It's a rough year personally. It's, try to block it out as best I can.
I know, man. I can't believe we got out alive.
That's all you can
uh,
hope to do at Homer Hickam.
you're either living or you're thriving, and there's nowhere in between.
That's right.
God, that was so stupid. I loved it though.
Oh, our wonderful high school careers.
I know, but in high school we learned how to count 105, and this was episode 105 of Fall Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow Cody Williams at the Sizzle20. You can follow the show at CFB Fall Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple. That would be great. Please subscribe to the show. That would be wonderful. Again, we're going to be coming to you on Thursday again. We're going to be doing some Antonio. We're going to do some 90s band. That was good, and you're definitely going to want to check that out.
That's a good tease. I like that. That was nice.
I did too, man. When 3.5 minutes feels like a lifetime, it's got to be false stuff.